It's Waxing Lyrical Baby.
Hello, Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical Baby in Dutch. I'm your host, Mains, and my colleague in the danger zone in Rainford. It's Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
Very well. Yourself?
I'm good, I'm good. It was nice to not have to watch Washington at the weekend. Always good. And the way the sporting calendar works, they're usually the end of the calendar, so they can't. This time they couldn't disappoint me. Don't worry though. This week they will be as they play the New York Jets in what could be one of the worst games of the year.
It's one of those when your team's not playing in one of like the big games, you do have this fear that whenever you go to, whenever Red Zone goes to your game and you see a team on offense, you just get this horrible feeling that something bad's going to happen. There's going to be an interception or a fumble. You never go and think, it's you never see Scott saying, we go live to Philadelphia. You don't. You just know nothing good's coming from it.
Bad news is coming. Brace yourselves.
Yeah.
We're not gonna talk Washington. All the Eagles.
But I want to.
I don't. I really don't. I don't want to, so I won't. What we are going to talk is we're going to plug into the mains. I've got a fantastic hot take. I've also got some news and also a helpful reminder to NFL GMs. We're also then going to dive straight into Fantasy Corner, get Neil's fancy darling and loser of the week. We're going to finish it up with my daily fantasy teams of the week, where I will then realise that I picked someone in the Thursday night game as I'm a moron, and luckily realised just in time, and I've changed it.
Well played.
Thank you. I thought so. I'm glad I was paying attention. So, without further ado, Neil, let's get on with plugging into the mains. We all love a hot take, Neil, and I've got one for you.
Well, as we know, this house is not. This house does not run to heat, shall we say? So by all means, fire it up.
I've worked out who the next coach fired should be. I always think that you should fire coaches based on the fact that they don't follow. They're either not very good, firstly, or they're not following a franchise standard.
Yeah, that sentence is far too long, and it could have ended after you saying, I always feel that coaches should be fired.
Yeah, I do. So this week, I believe the next coach that should be fired is Brian Flores of the Miami Dolphins. As, by Jove, is he ignoring his boss's wishes of trying to lose? As there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that man's trying to win every game.
I haven't seen it, but I've seen like clips of it. There's a show called New Amsterdam. Yep. I believe it's a hotel one, and it seems to be just what I've gathered from the trailers. It's a doctor who's being told not to treat people because they don't have insurance, but he's going to treat them anyway.
That's correct.
That's Brian Flores then.
Yeah. So I mean, we joke because we can. My dad he was a Miami fan and has been for I guess 30 years. I'd finally got on board about 3 weeks ago with losing every game to get Tua Tagovailoa, as I'd made him watch an Alabama game on a Saturday. I was in his house. This week he may still get Tua Tagovailoa due to Joe Burrow's performances at LSU for LSU in the Bama game. However, he's now weirdly confused by his team as they've somehow decided that they want to win, and not only are they wanting to win, but teams have galloped past them. Like Washington are at 32, and going headfirst into a battle with Cincinnati with consummate ease. As you know, I think they started as a favourite against the Jets.
I think it's only a 1.5 favourite.
Still silly. Let's be silly.
But what we have to remember about the Bengals, who are now in the box seat for the number one pick is that they are embracing the tank, 9-10 weeks too late, as evinced by the fact that they were never in the game against Baltimore, but they remained committed to establishing the run, which is why Joe Mixon got 30 carries in a game where pretty much from the get-go they were down by 2 scores. Zach Taylor, I salute you, sir, but it was pitiful. And yes, Lamar Jackson's touchdown run was electrifying, seeing him glide effortlessly through NFL defenders technically, but we should remember that he was going against the Bengals. Now, I'm not using that as a knock against Lamar Jackson, who he played. Oh, piss off with this, please. Let's end it now. And also you can't throw. Looks like he can. And, obviously against the Bengals, yes, but he still got to make the throw. People still got to catch them, and that's what he did. He then just decided, okay, now I'm going to run it. That's what we want. We don't want it to be, run, pass, punt. The Seattle way, lest he said, he says. But yeah, Cincinnati. Slightly tangent. Cincinnati. This is where I came in. With the NFL, I came in with the Bengals as an absolute joke. Then they briefly, improved, and then they were middling again, and then they were a picture of consistency. Now they're a joke again. So it is nice. It's always nice to come back to what you know. Because at the moment, I don't know their plan. And we've said this before, Ryan Finley didn't look great. He didn't look like he wasn't Luke Falk. But to be honest, that offense, what they're doing makes about as much sense as playing tennis in a bathroom. It's just going to lead to people getting hurt and frustrated, and nobody understands why they did it in the first place.
No, it's not going well, and I need them to do a job against Miami so we can secure that number one pick, so we can botch up someone's career. Next on to plugged into the mains, Neil. At the start of this, so let's say we're at the start of the season for one of these teams and week 2 for the other. Who's 5-4 is more insane, the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Oakland Raiders?
You'd have to say, given the fact that they lost Ben Roethlisberger, they didn't have Antonio Brown, obviously, they didn't have Le'Veon Bell. They went in with Mason Rudolph, who some say isn't very good. You have to say that the way they have been able to lean on their defense is more surprising, because I think some people, a lot of people had some faith in Josh Jacobs, even though I didn't have a strong track record of production in college. But people, I think it's more surprising because I think there was more people prepared to say, well, this division actually isn't great, so maybe they could fluke it, as opposed to, oh my God, they've lost Ben Roethlisberger. This team's going into the toilet. So I would say the Steelers. It's one of those, if the Steelers finish 8-8, now I know they don't do this because this isn't how they recognise Coach of the Year because you got into the playoffs, but if the Steelers go 8-8, Mike Tomlin's the Coach of the Year.
Yeah, that noise of Tomlin to Washington has gone surprisingly quiet. They were 0-3. We did talk about them in week 4. I find it stunning that the Pittsburgh are 5-4, considering their offense is total and utter trash. As someone who has Juju Smith-Schuster, and weirdly in a dynasty team I picked up, so I didn't pick any of these players, as Jalen Samuel was secretly made up until then, realizing that it wasn't a PPR dynasty league and wondering why the person picked him up in the first place. I think the Raiders is a good story. In the touchdown.co.uk Slack, one of the boys, an Oakland fan, is bigging it up that he can't believe he lives in a world where the Oakland Raiders may have won the Mac trade, and that's at the moment it's a lot closer than it was this time last year, when it was a total squash for Chicago. I like the Raiders, and I'll be honest, I think we all enjoyed laughing at John Gruden. I think we thought Mike Mayock had a role but wasn't allowed to do anything. It doesn't seem that either of those two things are true, and they've done a really good job.
Just flipping back to the Steelers for a sec. I mean, this time last year, we did have a discussion, I'm certain, that about the number of teams that didn't need quarterbacks. We seem to be at a point where a large proportion of the league had it sorted to an extent. There are an awful lot of bad, mediocre, or downright unwatchable offenses this year. We say the Steelers, it's a tough watch. The Eagles, it's a bloody tough watch. The Bills aren't fun on offense either.
No.
Obviously, I mean, at least at the start of the season, the Bengals were moving the ball. Now they're not. The Titans are, just boring. It was great. Obviously, I said last week, in DFS team, I suggested Derrick Henry, but then thought if it got away from him, it was a total wasted pick. It turns out it wasn't. But it's not fun to watch. The Chargers aren't fun to watch. The Broncos aren't fun. I'm not going to say defense is climbing back to prominence, but some offenses that, and now with the trade deadline gone, these offenses are on life support for the rest of the season.
They're not going to get any better, are they? Let's be honest.
No.
Not going to get any better. NFL and NFL GMs. I want to re-emphasize something for you. Buyer beware on first-round running backs, but most importantly, paying running backs. These are the highest-paid running backs by average salary in the NFL this year. Zeke, Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell, David Johnson, Devontae Freeman, and Saquon Barkley. I'm going to give you the stat lines for last week, Neil. Zeke Elliott, 20 carries for 47 yards, was stuffed on 2nd and 2 and 3rd and 2 at the end of the game to basically seal it for the other for Minnesota. Gurley
wasn't used in the passing game either.
Nope. Gurley, 12 carries, 73 yards, which to be fair was his best since week 1. Didn't get a touch in the 4th quarter. Le'Veon Bell, 18 carries for 34 yards. At some point in the 3rd quarter, about midway through, Sam Darnold scrambled for 24 yards and became the leading rusher on the team. David Johnson, 5 carries for 2 yards, 1 catch for 2 yards. In PPR, he got to 0. In standard, because he had a fumble, he was minus points.
There was one run that they've shown again and again from David Johnson. My God, if it's Alexa, show me stiff. There's no wiggle, no lateral ability. There's literally no juice there. It looked like, as he followed his blocker, he looked like an old lady being taken by the hand by a kind passerby before he could cross the road. He looked so old all of a sudden. And if he's not healthy, get him out, please, for his sake.
Yeah. Also, Devontae Freeman, 10 carries for 38 yards, 3 catches for 10 yards, and his team dominated the game, by the way. And my favourite, Saquon Barkley, 1 yard on 13 carries. I haven't, by the way, mentioned Alvin Kamara, who ran for 24 yards, and LaShawn McCoy, who was a healthy scratch.
Of all the takes I had in the off-season, and I had a few, the one that I was, one of the ones that I was proudest of is I was steering well away from Devonta Freeman, because I thought, he'd had 2 very good seasons, but his last 2 had been ravaged by injury, and I was just like, so why are we assuming this not exactly superb athletic specimen after 2 lost seasons is going to come back and be an impact player on this team with this offensive line? He's proved me right, which very few players do, so I doff my cap to you, sir. But, yeah, it's almost like running backs don't matter.
But the thing is, I think you hear that, and if you don't understand what the concept means, it's not that they don't matter. They are highly useful in your offense. However, the name of said running back doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And believe you me, I've also watched Christian McCaffrey, and I know he's amazing. But next year he might not be, and good luck to Carolina if they decide to pay him.
See, running backs do matter, just not for long.
Yeah, and that's why we all laughed at the Giants for picking Barkley at 2, because they picked Barkley at 2 and then picked a lad who most people thought they shouldn't pick the next year at 6, and already Daniel Jones is infinitely more important to the New York Giants than Saquon Barkley is, almost making that pick moot. Oh, by the way, anyone who thinks that Ezekiel Elliott is more important to the Dallas Cowboys than Dak Prescott hasn't watched the Dallas Cowboys all year. And by the way, they're paying him $20 million a year and haven't paid Dak yet.
And that's the laughable thing when they came out and said, we want Dak to stay here, but he needs to take a team-friendly deal. He doesn't need to appreciate shit. You've wasted your money paying the wrong people. Dak, and as I say, we've had our takes about Dak. Is he Patrick Mahomes? Is he Lamar Jackson? Is he Russ Wilson? No. Is he a good, competent starting quarterback in the NFL? Yes. We've seen they get paid. You've overpaid your running back. Congratulations. Well done. Pay your quarterback.
Well, congratulations, Dak Prescott. You are about to be paid like Kirk Cousins, as they're going to franchise you for 2 years.
Yeah.
That's it on the hot takes, Neil. And I plugged into the mains. Let us move on to fantasy, and let's find out who our fancy darling is this week.
Hello, darling.
My fancy darling this week is, it's a bit low-key and it's not particularly an exciting one. It's TJ Hawkinson, who is the rookie tight end for the Detroit Lions. The Lions are playing the Dallas Cowboys, and the Cowboys have shown a slight weakness against tight ends of late. In the last 5 games, they're allowing 8.6 targets per game for 6.4 receptions, 65.8 yards, and 0.8 touchdowns per game. In fact, in their last 2 games, tight ends have been targeted a total of 25 times, and those tight ends were the Giants and the Vikings tight ends. So not exactly game-changing talents. And Evan Ingram, did he play? I'm not even sure. I can't remember. Jeff Driscoll is a player who he didn't look terrible for the Lions, but obviously you prefer Matt Stafford to be there. The Cowboys' cornerbacks are not terrible. So you'd think that Golladay and Marvin Jones might see slightly less favourable matchups, especially with Jeff Driscoll playing, and maybe TJ Hawkinson can get a bit more volume. He started to become more involved in the offence again. So I quite like TJ Hawkinson. He may have been rage dropped a few weeks ago when the Lions were on their bye. Still quite a few teams on their bye. We don't know if George Kittle is going to be fit. So if you have a problem at tight end and he is available, I would seriously consider TJ Hawkinson this week.
I have a problem at tight end. It's George Kittle. It's best he doesn't when he plays Monday night. I didn't pick him. I did have Austin Hooper. Thought that's good. And then he got injured.
And then he died.
Yeah. That's why I hate fancy. And on that note, which people will hate fancy if they have this person on their team, Neil? It's fancy loser.
One of the NFL's favourite punching bags is obviously Kirk Cousins. In the last few games, he has 5 QB1 finishes in his last 5 games. 5 in his last 6 games. The only one he didn't was against Washington, where they didn't pass the ball because they established the run. They're playing the Denver Broncos this week, though, the Vikings, and Denver haven't been great this year, but it's been on the ground that they've been gashed. They've not actually been very welcoming to quarterbacks. If you look over their last 5 games, they're only giving up 189 passing yards per game, 0.4 touchdowns per game, and 0.6 interceptions. So it's not an easy out. I think with Adam Thielen likely to be missing again, this is going to be a Dalvin Cook / Alexander Mattison game. So obviously if Kirk Cousins isn't going to be great, you have to downgrade Stephon Diggs. Although maybe because it's the nature of the game, it may be good for Kyle Rudolph, who has shown in the last few weeks that he is becoming better, a bigger part of it, which, to be honest, he couldn't be less after what he'd been doing at the start of the season. But I don't like Kirk Cousins in this one. Denver are not terrible on defense, as you'd expect with Vic Fangio. But, yeah, I mean, as I say, we have a few quarterbacks on a bye this week, and people may think, oh, Kirk Cousins, yeah, I'd advise against it.
Yeah, there's, as someone who knows coupons well, consistency isn't his watchword unless it's consistently letting you down. Neil, on that note, let's go on to find out who we're picking in our daily fantasy teams of the week.
Mains and Duds. Daily fantasy team of the week.
Show me the money.
Show me the money indeed, Neil. Neil, who is your quarterback this week?
My quarterback this week is Derek Carr of the Raiders. They are playing the Bengals. He's 6,100. Carr has been good. This season, he's averaged 17.9 PPR points per game. Last week was the first time in 3 weeks he didn't hit 20 PPR points. PPR, it's a quarterback. Didn't hit 20 fantasy points. Cincinnati are crap. So I think, Oakland are at home. I like Derek Carr on this. The Bengals don't get a lot of sacks. Carr is, I believe, still leading the NFL in completion percentage, so he's going to move the ball. And, when the other players I've paid up for this week, Carr is a nice plug-in.
Yeah, my quarterback is Derek Carr, 6,100. We mentioned the Oakland Raiders. I think of all the surprising things, the fact that John Gruden hasn't jettisoned Derek Carr out of the building like he does with basically every other quarterback he's ever had is highly surprising. As you said, he's playing the Cincinnati Bengals, and they are a hot mess. Who's running back one, Neil?
Running back one, 10,500 is Christian McCaffrey.
Jesus Christ. Every week, his value goes up by $100 to see if somebody will still pick him. You did. I look forward to seeing the rest of your team.
Christian McCaffrey has had one game this season with less than 21 PPR points. One game. Granted, that was a long way below. He was 7.3. It was actually the lowest.
That was Tampa, was it?
That was Tampa, yeah. The lowest PPR of his outing of his career in a game that he played more than 10 snaps. He's just, you can set your watch by him. And lest we forget, the Panthers are playing the Falcons. Yes, the Falcons pulled off one of the surprises of the season last week by playing ball control and then beating the snot out of the Saints. But lest we forget, they are crap. And they cannot stop running backs. So, Christian McCaffrey, 11,000, I may start to hesitate. But 10.5, I'm going for it.
That is serious. My running back one is 6,300. It's Melvin Gordon playing Kansas City. Starting to ramp up. Now probably fitter than he has been in a long time. And he's playing Kansas City. Hey, I know you got rid of Bob Sutton, and I understand why. But you do know you replaced him with Steve Spagnuolo, right? And it's not 2007. So, Andy, love you, man. But that was a bad move. And your defense is just as bad as it was last year.
I think last week we saw how the Chiefs will be knocked out of the playoffs this year. We saw that last week.
Yeah, I think
someone's going to load up, strap on the big boy pants, and just run it down their throats. Especially as, let's be honest, the Chiefs are not getting that bye.
No, that's gone. That's gone.
Yeah.
I mean, they need to look behind them at Oakland and make sure they do enough to be the champs in their own division before they worry about getting a bye. Who's your running back 2, Neil?
Running back 2, 6,000 is Devin Singletary. The Bills are playing the resurgent Miami Dolphins. Since returning from injury, Singletary has seen his opportunities rise exponentially. He had 7 against the Dolphins the last time they played, then 9 against the Eagles, 24 against Washington, and only 15 last week. That's because it was a bit of a slobber knocker of a game. It was, it was a Frank Gore day, shall we say. He's not been terrible. He has averaged at least 4.8 yards per carry in all but one game this season, and in fact has 2 games where he's gone 9.5 yards per carry or more. He's quite involved in the passing game as well. He's had 6, 4, and 7 targets in the last 3 games. The Dolphins is a nice story, and I say the Bills' offense is not great, but the Dolphins are not great at stopping the run. And I think if Singletary's going to get the bulk of the carries over Frank Gore, despite the fact it's a Gore revenge game, 6,000, he was a nice plug-in after getting CMC.
My running back 2 is Ronald Jones, Tampa Bay, playing the Saints. He's 5,200. Actually, Bruce Arians quoted today wanting to get him even more involved in the passing game, which is excellent in this PPR format. Playing New Orleans, in the world of terrible losses, that Saints one has got to be right up there. Didn't help my touchdown 3, let's just put it like that. 5,200 I think is good value for Ronald Jones. So yeah, Tampa Bay, see what you can do.
Don't hate it.
Wide receiver 1, Neil.
My wide receiver 1, $6,000 is Cortland Sutton. The Broncos are playing the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings cornerbacks have been low-key crap. As much as we like, Everson Griffin and Daniil Hunter and Eric Kendricks, Anthony Barr, they can't cover anyone. So if the pass rush doesn't get home, which it probably will on more occasions than not, because, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, is Garrett Bowles still holding someone? Yes, he probably is. Cortland Sutton has, I think he has suffered for the fact that the Broncos have not been good on offense. As I say, one of the less exciting watches, but he's actually had a very, very impressive sophomore season. If I've got his numbers here, he hasn't gone over 100 yards since week 1. But if you actually look at his target share in every game this season, he's had 26%, 14%, 29, 26, 37, 31, 24, 21, 44% target share in their last game against Cleveland.
That's a lot.
I mean, it was only 8 targets. But if they're going to throw it to anyone, they're going to throw it to him. No Emmanuel Sanders there, of course. Noah Fant has been ridiculously inconsistent. I really like Cortland Sutton. And as I say, I don't think Denver are going to be in this. I can't see this being a shootout. But he only needs to take one to the house. And Minnesota have been quite forthcoming to to wide receivers so far this season.
Excellent. My wide receiver 1 is Tyreek Hill. He's my most expensive player this week, 8,700. Playing the Chargers. Just makes plays all the time. Like, oh look, he's just lobbed it. Oh, he won't get that because he's the small. Oh, he's caught it. Oh look, they've thrown it. Oh look, Tyreek Hill's wide open. Oh look, Tyreek Hill's running faster than anybody on the field. 8,700 is a steal.
He had 19 targets last week.
I know.
Yeah, and it's he is he is the model breaker because as you see his size. Is that you're not a number 1. Well, no, he's not. He's not a Julio Jones or a DeAndre Hopkins. But put the ball in his hands, and incredible things happen. And the Chiefs do like to put the ball in his hands.
They do. And he's not afraid to put it in a playmaker's hands. Wide receiver 2, Neil.
Another Carolina player. I've got DJ Moore. He's 5,900. He had his best game of the season last week in terms of PPR points. He's averaged 14.5 PPR points per game. And he's had more than 13 in all but 2 games. But he doesn't score touchdowns. That's one big annoying thing. He has seemed to have a better connection with Kyle Allen of late. It's an efficient one because he doesn't get as many targets as he did when Cam Newton was there. But as I said before, the Falcons defense is 7 different types of crap.
It is. And my wide receiver 2 is a revenge game-tastic. It's Jamison Crowder for the New York Jets against Washington. The only one who Sam Darnold seems to have any kind of rapport with in the passing game, And Crowder will be looking to score heavy and often against Washington. He is 5,700. Wide receiver 3, Neil.
Wide receiver 3 is Devontae Parker of the Dolphins playing against the Bills. Now, the Bills, it's not an easy out for wide receivers. They have a very, very good secondary. They have a good defense. And we know that Miami are not great. But again, you look at the numbers for Devontae Parker this season. His target share has hovered around the mid to high 20s. Last week, he had 30% of their targets. He was targeted 10 times against the Colts. Caught 5 of them for a very nice 69 yards. And before last week, he'd scored a touchdown in 4 of his previous 5 games. So I think we can assume maybe that the Dolphins might be playing from behind, but even if they're not, Parker is the type of wide receiver that Ryan Fitzpatrick has made an absolute career of just saying, oh well, and just throwing it up to him. And now, as we said, Parker seems to have worked out. I'd actually quite like to stay in this league. So, it seems to be coming on for him. So, 4,700, I don't hate it.
My wide receiver 3 is Mohamed Sanu. 5,100. It's New England against Philadelphia. He's probably the only wide receiver who'll go past 15 yards, and he'd probably only go 15 and a half. But against the cornerbacks of Philadelphia, I expect him to do well. He's not hit the ground running. I don't think he's had a light jog, but with a week after the bye, expects big things from Sanu this week.
Only qualm I have with that is that Sanu, as we know, lines up in the slot a lot, and slot receivers haven't really hurt the Eagles a lot.
True.
It's been the boundary ones. But the Patriots don't really have a true boundary receiver. I mean, they've got Philip Dorsett, who is going to be the deep threat. So let's assume he's going to get a look or two. But Sanu was, heavily involved against the Ravens last time out. So if he's already developed some chemistry with Tom Brady after 2 weeks, and as you say, with a bye week thrown in, I would expect them to try and get him the ball.
Agreed. Who's your tight end, Neil?
TJ Hawkinson, 3,600.
Mine is Darren Waller, 5,500. He's my handcuff with Carr. Really talented player. Like, one of them where you just, our friend Simesy hates the draft. Just thinks it's just not a waste of time, because obviously you get good players, but all the noise around it, and then half the good players are in the first round are rubbish, and then you pick up a load of players who no one had even heard of, and they're great, and Waller is one of them.
I think it's a great story as well, Waller, in the sense, that, as I say, at the start of the season, the main story around the Raiders was that arsehole Brown.
Yep.
And it was, what a joke. He's made them look, ridiculous, but they've helped it. And then this guy, who by his own admission smoked all the weed in the state when he was at college, has turned it around to become, not only a solid member of a team, but actually one of the best players at his position. It's a great story.
It is. Who's your flex, Neil?
My flex, this is a risk. It's Miles Sanders. The Eagles are playing the Patriots. The reason I put it in is because he's the closest thing the Eagles have got to a big play threat without Deshaun Jackson. He's fast. He's been good in the passing game. His opportunities have been fairly mixed. In his first 5 games, he had between 11 and 17 opportunities per game. Since then, he's had 6, 9, 6, but then he had 13 against Chicago. Now, the Patriots in the last few weeks, obviously they're solid. We know their defense is very, very good. But in their last 5 games, they're allowing 5.1 yards per carry to running backs. And that started against the Jets, where they allowed 4.6 yards per carry. Then they allowed 6.7 against the Browns, and then 6 against the Ravens. And obviously, these are all different types of running backs to Miles Sanders. Also, as well, Jordan Howard didn't practice this week because he had a shoulder injury. Now, I'm not going to say that all the carries will go to Sanders, because the Eagles haven't shown that that's what they want to do at running back. But I think if Jordan Howard were to miss, it would see more opportunities for Howard as Sanders as a rusher. So for what I paid for him here, I don't hate it, especially as how much he's been used in the passing game, which has been something of a pleasant surprise for everyone.
When I originally did this yesterday, in my flex was Kareem Hunt. I then realised that that game was on Thursday, and we don't pick Thursday games.
No.
So I have absolutely no idea how I'd missed that, but I did. Probably paying as much attention to the Cleveland Browns offensive scheme as Freddie Kitchens is. So instead of that, I'm going to pick Randall Cobb. He's also 4,300, and the Dallas Cowboys are at the Detroit Lions in a dome, somewhere where he would have played multiple times. He got 100 yards last week as Dak Prescott threw everywhere, and they still got beat.
You hate to see it.
The Dallas Cowboys are the gift that keeps on giving. 4,300. Good value for someone like Randall Cobb. Who's your defense and special teams, Neil?
The Carolina Panthers, $3,000. They're playing Atlanta. As I believe I've made it abundantly clear. One of the worst roughing the passer calls in the league last week against Gerald McCoy. Absolutely pathetic. But it's Aaron Rodgers, so must protect the stars. The Panthers' defense, though, it's not been terrible. If you look over their last 5 games, they've only allowed. Let me see. They've had more interceptions than they've allowed passing touchdowns. Teams are passing against them. Only Jimmy Garoppolo has passed fewer than 25 times on that 4. But say they are opportunistic, shall we say, and then they do get takeaways. So I think we can assume, given the porous nature of the Falcons' offensive line, they're going to make Matt Ryan's life a bit difficult. Ryan's generally careful with the ball, but he can have one of those games where he just keeps throwing it up for grabs, and he will take sacks. So Panthers for 3,000 to round this up nicely and make sure that I am sufficiently bullying the Falcons.
You have bullied them into some massive degree. I picked Jamal Adams, 3,100. You may think that means, as an added bonus, I've noticed that you get the other 10 defenders on the New York Jets not particularly bothered by any of them, just particularly bothered by Jamal Adams' numbers, as they are pretty spectacular. And I can obviously see why Gase and Douglas were desperately trying to get rid of him.
The problem is, I think, with Jamal Adams, who is one of the best safeties in the NFL, let's be honest with this, the Jets took a safety while Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson were still on the board. So I think that's always going to count against him in some people's eyes. Maybe they weren't aware of this, and I've just put the thought in their heads. If that's the case, you're welcome. What do you call that he did last week? Because it wasn't a classic fumble. It was just a gimme.
It's a Ed Reed special.
Yeah, I'm having that, lad. Gizzy.
Yeah, it was pretty good, like. So Neil, let's recap. Who's your quarterback?
Derek Carr.
I've got Derek Carr. Running back 1.
Christian McCaffrey.
Melvin Gordon. Running back 2.
Devin Singletary.
Ronald Jones. Wide receiver 1.
Cortland Sutton.
I've got Tyreek Hill. Wide receiver 2.
DJ Moore.
I've got Jamison Crowder.
Jamison.
Wide receiver 3.
Devontae Parker.
I've got Mohamed Sanu, tight end.
TJ Hawkinson.
Got Darren Waller, flex.
Miles Sanders.
Randall Cobb, and defense and special teams.
Carolina Panthers bringing the pain.
God. Old school Shine reference, genius. I've got the New York Football Jets. If you're wondering how much I think Washington stink, I picked 2 Jets in my daily fantasy team this week. There we go. Neil, where can people catch you for the rest of the week?
Rest of the week on the Twitter at mdutton13. Save this week has seen my usual offerings. My 5 stats to know from the last week of NFL action, including focus on the deeds of Lamar Jackson. Spoiler, he's very, very good. There's the wide receiver report. Lots of wide receivers this week had more than double-digit targets, most for quite some time. A few little quick thoughts there on some of the players who saw those targets, and also my tight end streamers. Those last 2 available on RotoViz. Go there, loads of great apps. You should subscribe. It's really, really good. And also, if you're going to be subscribing to things, why not go and subscribe to this podcast and leave us a review or a 5 stars? One person's done it in the last 2 years.
Yeah, please do on iTunes. Why not? I am at Mandy7. Combined, we are at Waxing_Lyrical. Touchdown 3 not as good this week. Went 1-2. However, did pick another unbeaten team to go down, and they did. Bravo, Seattle. That will be out later in the week, probably Friday. Until then, I will see you all on Twitter. Enjoy the show. We know we did. We'll see you guys on the other side. These top guys are out.